freeze.
Welcome to another edition of Truth and Rhythm. This is the interview show that gets deep in the pocket with contemporary music's foremost masters of the groove. I am your host, Scott Dr. GX Goldfine. If you enjoy this programming, subscribe to the Funk and Stuff channel on YouTube, which is where Truth and Rhythm lives, and be an advocate by spreading the word among fellow funk, jazz, and R&B music lovers. Join Truth and Rhythm's membership program through Patreon. You can also submit a direct donation to the cause anytime at funkandstuff.net. At that site, you can also purchase the book Everything's on the One, The First Guide of Funk. Shop for official Truth and Rhythm and Funk and Stuff merchandise, and use the Amazon links for all of your online purchases, which allocates a percentage to this show. For those of you who go the extra step in supporting the show, you have my heartfelt gratitude for allowing us to continue to shine the light on those special artists whose quest is to find truth in rhythm. I am pleased to welcome to Truth and Rhythm Texas-based blues rock guitar slinger, singer, and multi-instrumentalist Lance Lopez. Inspired by giants like Jimi Hendrix, Stevie Ray Vaughan, Billy Gibbons, and Johnny Winter, he's released 9 albums since 1998, which was his debut, including 2023's fantastic Trouble is Good, which was named one of Funk and Stuff's top 10 rock and blues albums of the year. Though he might not be a household name, Lopez's gritty tone and fretboard agility are prominent in an incendiary emotive playing style that places him among today's best hard-edged blues-rooted guitarists. Having shared stages with the likes of Steve Vai, Jeff Beck, ZZ Top, and Joe Bonamassa, he has also worked with Supersonic Blues Machine, Eric Gales, and Buddy Miles. Speaking of which, coming up on March 1st, he is among the performers at For the Love of Buddy Miles tribute concert in Dearborn, Michigan. Lance, man, thanks for joining the show. How are you?
Thank you so much for having me, Scott. Wow, that was quite the introduction. It was bringing back a lot of memories. I was like, wow, yeah, wow, okay. A lot of stuff I've forgotten about there. Thanks, Scott.
Yeah, see, when you look back, it can be really impressive. You know, you just don't realize because you keep your head down and keep going and going, right?
Pretty much, yeah. It's great to hear. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. You're welcome. Where are you today? You're at your home in Texas?
Well, actually, I'm in Nashville. I've been in Nashville for about 5 years now.
Okay.
Yeah, I relocated to Nashville, Tennessee back in I guess the end of 2018, kind of the beginning of 2019. So interesting place, old Nashville. But yeah, a little bit change of scenery. Little bit of a geographical change for me, and it's been very interesting, and it's grown quite a lot just in the few years I've been here. It's gotten pretty crazy. Pretty much everybody I worked with in Los Angeles, as a matter of fact, is all here now. So it's been very interesting being in Nashville. Very different scene than Texas, and so here we are at the old flat here with. Here in Nashville.
All right. Well, you're just over the Smoky Mountains for me over here in North Carolina.
Nice.
And, I migrated from LA also, so it's a little bit different, but
yeah,
booming here too with how much growth since I came out here. So, but
yeah.
Nashville's a fun town. You know, any place that just centers around music, you got to love it.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. There's a lot of diversity and a lot of very interesting characters, a lot of very interesting approaches to music, which is a lot different kind of than where I came from in Texas, but somewhat similar, but yeah, it's been quite an adjustment and very different and very, very cool. A lot of good friends here. And, when you mentioned Supersonic Blues Machine, and years ago, when I was in that band, they were wanting me to relocate to LA. And I looked at real estate in LA and I was like, you got to be kidding me. You know, I was like, for a house that I bought in Dallas for 150,000, they want 1.5 million for, you know. So I was like, and it was Robin Ford, the guitar player. We were actually on a flight over to Europe, and it was funny. We were Kenny Aronoff and Fabrizio Grossi were sitting in seats right 2 feet away from us, and Robin Ford and I were standing up on the flight, walking around, stretching our legs. And I was deciding on whether I was going to go to Austin or Nashville. And that was kind of the toss up at that point. And it was Robin Ford that said, he got right in my face and he goes, you need to go to Nashville. I don't care what these guys say. They're like sitting, and I'm like, Robin, they're right there. Robin was like, I don't care what these guys want you to do. Go to Nashville. So here we are in Nashville, Tennessee, all these years later. And it's been great. You know, it was great. It's really great when I need to get, I need to get some stuff done for, music. There's so much accessibility to like guitar repair, amp repair, a vehicle for touring, gear and odds and ends I need for touring. That's not really accessible in a lot of, except LA, maybe, or New York. But it's all very accessible. And the thing about Nashville is it's very compact as opposed to those other places. So it's and I've lived in both other places as well. So this is like the best of both worlds for me. It's still in the South. I grew up in the South, and so it's, I'm not so far away, like I was when I was in LA or New York. So, it's pretty cool. And I met a lot of great, friends here, the best guitar players here, like Tom Bukovac and Brent Mason and Guthrie Trapp. I've all became friends with all those guys, Ford Thurston, Jack Roosh, a whole host of really great guitar players here in town that I befriended immediately, as soon as I got here. So, and they kind of welcomed me in. So that's been really cool.
Well, I'm glad that it didn't change your sound too much, because, it's still, it hasn't exactly gone toward country, so, let's say, so that's all
Right.
good, You ever run
Right.
into Jack White out there at all?
I haven't, my girlfriend, she's a sword swallower and like a variety act and like a Coney Island legend. And she's like circus performer and all of those things. She performs at Third Man Records quite a bit. There's a venue over there called the Blue Room. And matter of fact, I think she's got a show coming up there in 2 weeks. But they do shows over there all the time. And no, I really haven't seen Jack much. Jack and I know each other from afar, and he sent a whole truckload of amps for me to use over in Memphis on one of my albums I did. So no, I don't see him as much, but I do hang out over at Third Man quite a bit. And my girlfriend Katie Ramirez goes by Lorraine the Thrill, her stage name. She's kind of more part of that world than really I am.
I got you. So, Lance, let's go back and talk a little bit about, how you came to be where you are. Looking at, your history, you moved around a lot as a teen, and, I guess guitar maybe was, I don't know, a voice in the wilderness or something like that for you that you'd really, glom to. And you were so young when you first started out playing in bars and things like that. What can you tell us about, your formative guitar years? And it was interesting to me that, you had so much seemingly Stevie Ray influence, but you were young, when we lost him,
Yeah.
So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, I was into guitar and music as far back as I can remember, seeing footage of Elvis on TV. My dad and Elvis Presley were very close friends. They were in the army together. So there was a lot of influence there. And I always just kind of knew Elvis as kind of a member of our family, really. And he was my dad's close bro. I mean, that's kind of how I viewed it. And so those were the first images I had of guitar playing, and I just immediately wanted to do that. So therefore, my father really supported that. And then growing up in the 80s as a kid, I mean, there was just guitar music everywhere. All the rock music was based in guitar, Van Halen, AC/DC, Kiss, all etc. So growing up in that kind of world in the arena rock setting, I was able to see all those bands live and see Van Halen and see AC/DC, who I saw probably live more than any other band as a child, who I always gravitated towards. And then I realized later, I was like, oh, this was just a big high powered blues rock band, you know, and that's why it just really resonated. So yeah, I growing up in that whole world, that was kind of my childhood, you know. My father got me a guitar for Christmas, and you know, it was like, you know, that really, if you listen to the lyrics of Johnny Be Good, I mean, it literally was like what it was. I was born in Shreveport, Louisiana. You know, I was in a town close to New Orleans, you know, literally sitting outside under the tree, learning how to play. And it's so funny. I listened to that and I was like, man, that sounds like my childhood. You know? So, you know, that's how it went. And then my mother, my parents, you know, they split when I was very young. So my father went to New Orleans and my mom went to Dallas. And so I went with my mother to Texas. And, you know, and I'd been going to arena rock shows. Like I'd mentioned, I'd seen all those bands, you know, that were, you name it, I saw them in the 80s. I mean, you know, all those, you know, the hair bands, all the rock bands, all the big ones, all the mid-level, all of them. And so that was our thing. We went to concerts. And so I started to play. You know, I gravitated more towards a bluesier style. And that's, like I said, that's why out of all those rock bands, you know, AC/DC really resonated. Angus Young guitar playing and Malcolm Young's riffage really like resonated. So when I would jam with my friends, they were all shredder guys.
The black SG back there. I don't know if you can see that.
Oh, dude, look at that. Holy cow, man.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Love
yes.
Angus. Yeah.
Angus. And then I really identified with him too, because he was like a little schoolboy, you know. So I was like, hey man, I'm a little kid too, you know. So but so I would play with my friends and everybody was into Van Halen. And in our town where we lived in Shreveport, you know, Eddie Van Halen and his wife was from there. Wolfgang's mom was from Shreveport. And so they were always in town. So all the kids in town wanted to be that. And I was playing more like Angus Young, or, you know, I was growing up playing the Chuck Berry records. So I was already like in this blues box thing and I didn't know it. And I would go play with all my friends and they would go, man, you play too bluesy, dude. You know, like it wasn't a good thing. And I remember going home and telling my dad, I was like, all the kids are telling me I'm playing too bluesy and kind of making fun of me for it. And my dad pulled out a BB King record and then he had like a photograph of him and BB King together. You know, and he was like, this is BB King. And it just like, it was as important as hearing Jimi Hendrix for the first time. I mean, it just totally like, that was like, and then Angus Young began to make sense. I was like, oh my God, that's what he's playing, you know? And then everybody else, Clapton, Jimmy Page, all those guys, it made sense, you know? And so when I moved to Dallas with my mother, the first thing I saw in the newspaper was BB King was coming. And so I asked my mom, I think I was 12 years old, and I asked my mom, take me to see BB. And she did. And so when we got to the concert, as soon as we got there, everybody had these t-shirts that had SRV on them, like the entire place. And I was like, what does SRV mean? And I remember it making me mad. Like I was angry about it. And then out came Stevie Ray Vaughan. And it was his last hometown show. Totally blew me away. And I was so into Jimi Hendrix, you know, and I'd never seen anybody. And for me, that was the bar, you know, and I had never seen, you know, anybody attempt to play Jimi Hendrix until that day. And I think that was the thing, really, to be honest with you, that not alone his sheer power and who he was, but looking back, that's really what did it for me, was like, there's finally somebody playing Jimi Hendrix live. You know, and I didn't know anything about Randy Hansen or any of these other guys that had kind of done it before. But, you know, seeing Stevie Ray Vaughan play Voodoo Child was the turning point for me. So I went around to the next day. I got all the blues records. I said, the blues is what I want to do from here on out. And I went to all the guitar shops in Dallas, and all the guys said, "Oh, well, man." And I was talking about Stevie Ray Vaughan, and they were like, a lot of them were like, "Big deal." They were all like, they go, "Man, he hangs out over at Charlie's guitar shop. Go hang out with those." Like, because they were all like shredder guys and metal guys. And they were like, "Go over to Charlie's." So I had my mom literally take me over there every day, and I'd bring like my wah-wah pedal and my stack of Hendrix records. And Bob Falls and Charlie, Mark Pollock. Charlie Wurs had already passed away, but Mark Pollock, the original owner. And I met guys like Clint Birdwell, who just sadly passed away recently, and Smoking Joe Kubek. And they were all hanging around going, "Man, Stevie Ray's going to love this little kid." They were like, because all I talked about was Jimi Hendrix, and they were like, "Stevie's going to love him." And then like a month later, he was gone. And it was like, what just happened? So it was a really, really big high and a really big low. So yeah, I was accepted into his circle of friends, everybody that knew him, because I was kind of set to meet him and hang out with him when he got home. And
did you
so
meet
everybody
Jimmy?
that he knew became even his mother. I became close with his mom, played a lot of shows with his brother. And so that influence was very, very impactful, but it really was, I learned more from, his circle of friends. And there were a lot of other great guitar players that came out of Oak Cliff, guys like Rocky Athis and David Brown and Mike McCullough. And all those guys they grew up with were all extremely great. So I got to grow up and hang around all those guys in his circle of friends and learn that way. So it was super impactful. And then just growing up around the Dallas blues scene, like I said, around Jimmy Vaughn and Anson Funderburg and all like the real blues purists, and then also the blues rock guys and then the rock guys. So it was, because Dimebag Darrell was a very close friend of mine in the Pantera world and the metal guys and then the blues guys. So there was this big intermingling of people. And then by high school, I met Billy Gibbons and, we became super close. So, just growing up in Texas, I was very fortunate and blessed to be around a lot of great, great guitar players and learn from them.
And where were you at in terms of your skill level and your career and life when there was that like wave of young guitar players that emerged in the wake of Stevie's passing, the young guys like Kenny Wayne and Eric Gales and Johnny Lang and those guys. So they're a little bit older than you or younger than you, or where
we were all about the same age. Well, Eric's a couple of years older. Kenny Wayne, and that's what I was going to say about Shreveport. We were both from Shreveport. Our families knew each other well. His dad was our big DJ and concert promoter. My father was a police officer. They knew each other. But, I didn't have, my dad's biggest connection was Elvis Presley, and he did not abuse that relationship. Like we were more like family. There was no abuse of the relationship or, hey, help my son out. So as far as like my dad, a lot of those people you mentioned, their parents managed them. My dad didn't manage me. He kind of pushed me out and said, get out there and make your own way. And so what happened for me during that time is I became a sideman for a lot of great blues and R&B and soul singers. So I didn't have more or less that coddling and that financial investment in that dadagery, as I call it. My dad didn't manage me. He did not protect my career. He was like, you better be able to get out there and hang. And so which I was very grateful for, man. I got to hang out with all the great guys. And a lot of those guys I was playing with, like Johnny Guitar Watson, Little Milton, and Bobby Bland, and all these different people. I didn't even know who they were until guys like Clapton and Ronnie Wood and Rod Stewart and all those guys were coming backstage to hang out with them. And then I thought, oh my God, and then they were like, do you know who working for? And I was like, apparently not. I was like, I guess not, man, you know. So it was really cool to go out and get that kind of education. You know, I had an opportunity to go to Berklee School of Music back then too, and I didn't. I went on the road instead, and I kind of always went, man, you know, should I have gone to school? There was a lot of times where I kind of struggled with that, you know, like, man, I should have went to Berklee and I should have done this and blah blah blah. And then a lot of my friends that graduated from Berklee go, dude, we were wishing we could go do exactly. You just went directly and did what we were wishing we could do while we were sitting in school, you know? So that's kind of where it went for me during the height of all that. And, you know, 96, 97, 98, before I put out my last record, I was playing guitar with Lucky Peterson. And Lucky was, you know, just such a phenom. I learned so much from him. And during that era, he was kind of his own force to be reckoned with during all that as well. And, you know, was such a powerhouse performer. I remember meeting Prince through Buddy Miles, you know, early on back in the early 2000s. And I just remember, you know, talking to Prince about what we're talking about, like all the guys I'd played with who were big heroes of his. And then I'd mentioned Lucky, and I'd been playing, and I just remember, and he was like, he goes, "You played with Lucky Peterson?" And I was thinking, like, dude, you're Prince. I was like, what? And Lucky had this extreme reverence for Lucky, and I you know, I just never forget, because I didn't realize, you know what I mean. And I always looked at like Prince as this huge superstar, and as far as a musicianship level, I'll never forget that. So that's when it later on down the road is when it really sunk in and landed for me how important that education was, and how, you know, like singing and being a performer, how to engage an audience, you know, and how to sing really, and how to be a vocalist, you know, really was the gift of that. And, you know, and then you mentioned Johnny Lang. I'll just never forget Johnny coming and playing shows with Supersonic Blues Machine, and him drinking beer and like crying. And he was like, "Lance, I don't understand why, man. You weren't like so massively like pounding the bar." And like, I was like, "Johnny, it's gonna be okay. That was my life. You're okay." Like, he was like, you know. And, you know, it is what it is, you know. And
well, plus some of those guys, in my opinion, like Johnny Lang, had to do some compromises and concessions to the record labels and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, whereas you were just really, I feel you were doing exactly what you wanted to do.
I did, and that was the beauty of it, is that we did get to make we didn't. You know, it wasn't like hey, let's do a record and sound just like Stevie Ray Vaughan, or let's do, you know, this kind of record because everybody else is doing it. We were doing kind of what we felt, you know, what was what I was just garnering all that influence that I had gotten from playing with Buddy Miles, playing with Lucky Peterson, playing with all those guys, and you know, and just amalgamating it into, you know, my original music, you know, and I just wanted to write the original music that I felt like doing. So yeah, there wasn't like a whole going after a certain thing or in the genre. It was just doing what we felt like we wanted to do.
Did you always think you would sing from the get-go, or did that kind of get added on?
It got added on. You know, it was Bobby Blue Bland. I remember I went out and I've been playing with Johnny Taylor, and I was playing with Johnny Guitar Watson, and kind of bouncing between Johnny Taylor, Johnny Guitar Watson, and Little Milton. And we were like on these package tours and doing these convention centers. And then I went out on a tour with Bobby Blue Bland, and it was Bobby. Bobby knew that I was already friends with Lucky Peterson, and he had known that, you know, that you know, I was going to come play with him. And he was like, "Man, you got to sing." And I just remember being terrified. And I'm like sitting there with Bobby Blue Bland, because I already played a couple shows with him, and hearing him sing would, like, him and Johnny Taylor and those guys would like overpower the band. I mean, they would almost like shut the PA down. They were so powerful, you know, and I was just terrified. And he took me to the back of the bus, and he put on a bunch of gospel music. And that's where it started. He sat me down and he put on like Aretha Franklin's Amazing Grace record, Reverend James Moore and the Mississippi Mass Choir, Reverend James Cleveland, like all this the Five Blind Boys, on and on and on, all that real heavy duty gospel music. And that's where I went, oh, now it's all really beginning to make sense, the singing. So that's where it started for me. And it was all thanks to Bobby Blue Bland. I would have never attempted to be a singer. Johnny Taylor, who was also a very great singer, who I really started with, and he kind of always gets credit in my story because he was the first guy that hired me and then introduced me into that world. But it was really Bobby Blue Bland, and me and his son Rod are like, he's like, Rod's like my brother, and he's just over in Memphis, so we talk quite a bit, and we're super tight and close. Also, too, because Eric Gales and I, also grew up together. We were lifelong brothers too. So all that huge Memphis connection that we had, I became very close with Bobby Blue Bland's son Rod, and we're the same age, so we related to each other very well. And so yeah, it was really thanks to Bobby. And like I said, man, seeing, talking to Rod Stewart and that's his number one singer. And when I was on tour with Whitesnake later on in the mid 2000s, I would talk to David Coverdale, and he would call me in there and go, "What was it really like being on tour with Bobby Bland?" It's like, I'm telling you stories. I was like, what? So it landed for me how impactful and how important that really was.
You didn't know what you didn't know. That's awesome.
Exactly. And it's probably better that I didn't and go in there really even more terrified. I think I was already terrified, but I think had I known in advance, it had probably been a little more overwhelming than it already was.
What would you say was the most challenging aspect of your playing to develop as you were coming along in terms of your style?
It was rhythm, for sure. It was the rhythm playing. The lead playing, anybody, especially like I said, growing up in that era of shredders and tappers and, the Van Halens and the Steve Vais and the Satrianis and the Yngwie Malmsteens and the whole thing in the 80s. It was like I started to learn really quickly that guys focused on doing that, but then they couldn't play with a band. Like they could sit there and play Eruption, but they couldn't get in a room with a bass player and a drummer and jam. That blew my mind. I was like, wow, and it was the lack of rhythm. So again, I think that was what another importance of my musical upbringing, being a sideman to all those great soul and R&B and blues artists, was that, I got to stand back in the back for years and be just a rhythm guitar player, which then helped me later in power trios to cover a lot of space, and to really formulate the chordal voicings, even though I may be not using a whole lot. It's still the percussive, everything moving at once and covering all the ground, and being able to sit next to a horn section and comp, what horns were playing, so that when I got into a power trio, I would think like even lead lines, I would think like horn sections, not guitar players. And Robin Ford and I talk about this. Like Robin doesn't even listen to guitar players. He doesn't listen to lead guitar players. He listens to people that play, different instruments, because he's like, if you listen to another guitar player, you're going to end up sounding just like that guitar player. He's like, if you listen to other instruments, that's how you will begin to develop your style. And so I was like, wow, okay, that's good news. I was doing it right the whole time, and listening to Coltrane. And that's where I started to try to develop speed, was listening to, jazz horn players and different people. So, that for me, being a rhythm player and having, the ability to sit back and just comp and play rhythm was timing and sitting in a mix and being an ensemblist. It's so easy for a lead guitar player to get out front and get out in front of the band and be, the showboater or, louder than everybody else. It allowed me to really learn how to control, even though, a lot of people say, oh man, Lance plays so loud. Well, yeah, in a power trio, I do. I didn't when I played in a 9-piece band with 5 horn players, and I still don't today. Like if I'm backing a singer or I'm in an ensemble, yeah, it needs to sit in the mix. But if I'm out in the front being a power trio where I have to cover this whole side of the stage by myself, it's the blend. How do we blend all that comping and that rhythm along with the lead guitar playing?
I
So
mean,
it was
when
the
you think
merging.
about it, it's a similar path to Hendrix too, with the Isleys and Little Richard and all that stuff he did to get the rhythm down so well, and then all the lead stuff and the singing.
Right.
Yeah,
Well, it was interesting. I'm glad you brought up Jimmy, was because in that sense, because playing with those artists and being on what they call the Chitlin circuit back then, which was a lot of African American clubs in the South and festivals and all that, and fish fries and barbecues and all these different big, huge field, concerts that would happen. Uh, there were people still on that circuit that were there when Hendrix was, and then you had to think that was only 30 years before. So if I'm thinking in terms of today, I'm thinking like that's 1994. So
it's
that's how
weird.
much
Yeah,
time going back to that era, he had just been there. And so they were like, oh yeah, I remember that Hendrix boy, and it would be like, and they would be tailoring my clothes. And I would just be like, I was like, what? I was like, oh yeah, man, Jimi Hendrix was in this band. And I would be like, wait, did you just say Jimi Hendrix? That's how I discovered that Hendrix had played with all those people while I was playing with all the same people. And I was going, wait a minute. And so that's what, when I met Buddy Miles, that's what brought us together. Was he heard that rhythm comping and he knew immediately that I had come from that school. He just, by watching the way I shaped the chords and then listening to it, that he knew that's what joined us together. He gave me the biggest giant hug and he was like, I've been looking for you, man. And so that's what really brought, me and him and Billy Cox, really all understood each other so well because, and I didn't have again, probably having known that before I went into that world, it would have probably been a way more overwhelming. So, there again, you go, hey man, Berkeley or like Chitlin Circuit, it's like, I would rather go to the same school that Jimi Hendrix went to,
right. Yeah. Um, I'm looking at videos, and thank goodness for YouTube, and there are some out there, plenty actually, but that show you back in the 90s, even before you had your first record out.
Yeah.
And I mean, you can see that you're just channeling, you're at that level where you can just let it go and channel, let it flow through you. And, you're not having to really think about it, overthink stuff. And when did you get to that level and point, and for other aspiring players out there, what can you advise to try to get to that point?
Man, Scott, that's a great question. And I think, just really remembering back, I think really around high school, I just remember I was playing a lot of gigs. I was working a lot, as a young guitar player. And, I had my band at school, which, we were like a little punk band and metal band. And, what all the kids wanted to hear, playing all the school parties and the after prom keg party. And so it was a lot of, you're a cover band. You're playing all the music that was happening at that time, like Metallica and Nirvana and Alice in Chains, all that rock music that was happening in the 90s. And and then I would go play with I had adults. I went and played in actual bars and went and was a working musician. And I had to I remember leaving my high school band, and because we were booked so much and I was playing in actual bars, all my friends, number one, were pissed off at me because I could get into a bar and they couldn't, and then I was playing, and then I was earning good money. And that was my high school job, was playing live. And so that's when it began to develop for me. I was out playing live, and it it was playing live and playing with other musicians. And again, I think that's the importance of, you can sit in your room all day and learn how to be, Joe Satriani or whoever, whatever shred guys out there right now. And or you could, you go out and start playing with other people and playing with other musicians. And I think that is what developed jamming, just getting in a room and jamming for hours. I think that's what started to really open up that channel, and listening to other music, not just listening to Stevie Ray Vaughan and Jimi Hendrix and whoever. It was listening to John Coltrane, Miles Davis, heavy jazz records like that where that was all that was about, listening to Coltrane, listening to Miles, the Electric Miles stuff, in the early mid 70s, where they were just jamming on the one and just getting out there. That was the stuff that continuous jamming was what for me was what opened it up. And so that was, during high school and all that. And then all that changed when I went to be a sideman. Then it was like right back in the box and get back here and then learn how to play rhythm and then go back out and solo some more. So that's really when it began to develop. So that's what I would suggest. I mean, it's about listening to all those kinds of records, people, that are jamming a lot and really getting in tune with that and really trying to open that up. And then just, hours of repetition and playing and practicing and doing that, it's like, I mean, I practiced, when I got out of school and I was at home, I mean, I practiced at times for 9 hours a day, man. I mean, that's all I did all day long was practice and play. And, and then would turn all the records off that I was learning to. And then how do I come up with my own thing, and how do I start merging all of this to be my own style? So, and then going for it. Yeah. I mean, that was just, it became a connection, I don't know, man, maybe, maybe some acid and some shrooms help too. I don't know. Just being honest.
Hey, Truth and Rhythm, baby. That's the show.
Don't try this at home, kids.
All right. When I had Eric Gales on, who I just love him so much, but yeah. I asked him when he's in that space, what's going through his mind.
Yeah.
And so I'd like to ask you that same question. And if you didn't hear it or see it, I'll tell you what he said after you tell me what goes through your head.
Oh man. I mean, all kinds of things. I mean, I'm thinking about my chick. I'm thinking about, thinking about that. I'm thinking about, just all kinds of ethereal stuff, man. I go into a very spiritual place at times. And then, other times it's almost a sexual thing, but, man, it's really interesting. That's an interesting question because it's all over the place. Sometimes, I mean, just coming back to earth, I mean, coming off stage, that's why I need a minute. I know people have approached me immediately coming off stage to sign stuff or to do whatever. And I'm just kind of like, I need a minute, and I'm not trying to be a dick. It's like, I'm just like, I'm trying to figure out where the fuck am I? Mm-hmm. I'm sorry, man. Can I cuss on? I'm sorry.
You can.
It's just like, I'm trying to figure out where I am. I'm just like, whoo, I got to come back down because it's just like, damn, dude, that was a lot. So, it's a lot of it is that, it's coming back to earth, man. For me, it's very out of body and very crazy, but yeah. I mean, and sometimes it's just big titties.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sorry, girls. Just being honest.
Yeah. Eric talked about, thinking about pain.
Oh, dude, yes. Oh my God. I mean, do you hear how me and Eric play? I mean,
that's the blues, man. That's
about our lives.
Serious blues, yeah. Exactly.
It's like, fuck, man. No, absolutely. No, yeah. I mean, especially in the blues. And and that again, to go backwards to the musical school I came from, that those were the guys. Like I'll never forget, I was on the road with somebody. I can't remember who it was. It was Johnny Taylor or one of those dudes, maybe Lucky or some one dude. And I was out on the road, and my first girlfriend, who was like my little first love, was cheating on me, because I was gone all the time, and we were kids. I mean, you're teenagers, man, and it has to happen at some point, right? And so, and I just remember feeling that. And I was like, fuck. And I remember and I was so grateful that I was with those dudes that, were able to sit me down right then and there in real time and go, man, that's the blues, like what you're going through. And then it was kind of like, man up, grab your guitar and put it out that way. And so, yeah, that real deep thing. Oh yeah. And all the trauma and the childhood stuff and the healthy way to get it out that wasn't, drugs and alcohol and the massive abuse that was happening as well of substances. I mean, now today it's even better without that, because it's like that is the way, the main way to really channel it out and to really make it pure and a release of it. I mean, one of my students, longtime students, who's doing very well now, a girl named Allie Venable. I was working with her, and she began to get a lot of notoriety around our area. She was playing shows with us. She was out playing a lot live and a lot with a lot of other guitar players. And she was getting a lot of press, and she was still in high school. She was probably a sophomore or junior, real early on in high school. And I would go over to her house, man. I was doing lessons with Allie like 3 times a week. I mean, I was going over like Monday, Wednesday, and Fridays. If she didn't have a gig, sometimes it was like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. I was doing like a lot of lessons with Allie. And I went and she called me one day, and I was on her way to the house for a lesson, and I called her, and she sounded real bummed out. And she was like, I don't know if I want to play today. And I was like, dude, I'm almost to your house. Like, I'm almost there. So sorry. I'm like on the way there, dude. Like, we got to play. I'm not feeling it. And so I got there, and she was in a room, and she wouldn't come out. And her dad was there, and he was like, I don't know, man, maybe you can talk to her. And these girls at school were picking on her because she was in the newspaper and was getting a lot of press. And it was like such a mind-blowing thing to see that side of like girls being mean to each other, and teenage girls and high school bullshit and cheerleaders and being mean to the artistic girl. And I was like, I never had seen it from that side. But it's still, again, then it became my responsibility, like Bobby Blue Bland and Little Milton and all those guys did with me when my little girlfriend was cheating on me, was like, sit down, pick your guitar up, and play the fucking blues, and this is the blues. You want to play the blues? This is it. And so that was my opportunity for her, because she didn't want to play. She like went in her room, like doing what teenage girls do. And so what was cool was I had the ability to then get her out, and we sat down and we played, and she started playing some amazing shit. And I was like, there you go. Now it's not just that technical ability of playing, the actual blues, the technical way. It's this shit, coming from your head to your heart to your hands, that, like Michael Bloomfield used to talk about. It's that translation. And so it was really cool to be a teacher and a mentor, like guys had been for me, to do that with her. But from a complete, because, the blues is about that. It's about your girl's cheating on you, or she left you, or my baby done left me again. And I had like the stereotypical, like textbook shit. This was a girl that had cheerleaders and shit picking on her and was like depressed and sad about it. So it was like, wow, this is a whole new perspective. And the shit still is the blues.
Blues is universal. Cool. I mean, that's what, yeah. And I've always, gravitated to just the blues-based style, rather than the shreddy. I love speed, in playing, but it's got to have that feeling. It's got to have that rhythm and be locked in on some level. And one of the things I've always felt is the common thread through different genres of that, even though those genres are looked at as separate, places. But, to me, if you listen to, a ZZ Top or a Stevie Ray or
Mm.
a AC/DC or even an Ohio Players or Funkadelic,
Hell yeah.
or heavy blues, like, going back to, Muddy or whoever,
Mhm.
it's got that same feel to me,
Absolutely.
which is the rhythm is in your soul,
Right.
and the playing touches those spots in you. And I think, players like you get that and it comes out in your music, some of your blues has a touch of funk in it,
Oh, absolutely.
you know?
Absolutely.
So can you talk to that at all about the intersection of, that feeling and those styles? And because, for example, and maybe not everyone knows it, but I mean, you did a cover of Fop early on, which was an Ohio Players tune. And, you know,
Mhm.
so segregating of all these styles troubles me.
Right. Well, I mean, growing up again, that musical school I came from, the R&B and the soul and all. I mean, that's where I came. That was where I went to school. Um, and it was funny because when I met Prince, I mean, Prince was like, he looked at me and he said, because we were talking about bands and he was asking me, who I loved as a kid. And I was telling him, like, oh man, I was really into Led Zeppelin. I used to love to smoke weed and listen to Led Zeppelin when I was a kid, and we were talking about it. And he looked at me and he said, well, Ohio Players was my Led Zeppelin, you know. And so and I loved them, and I thought, wow, this is so cool that I got the opportunity to hang with Prince and that we shared that kind of commonality in these bands.
What were the circumstances of you meeting Prince?
Buddy Miles. It
Oh,
was
okay.
it was through Buddy. Buddy took me down. It was during the Rainbow Children tour, and he took me. Buddy, Prince was playing at the Fair Park Music Hall in Dallas, and he didn't even tell me. Buddy didn't tell me where we were going or anything. He was like, "We're going somewhere tomorrow. Like, put on all your best shit." Wear your hat, with the feather. Yeah, like put on your little vest and all your little shit you got and your jewelry I gave. And I was like, what are we doing? And it was like, and be here at 9 in the morning. I was like, 9 in the morning? The fuck? I was like, dude, okay. And he wasn't telling me like anything about where we were going or anything. So here I am putting on all my stage gear, at 7 a.m., and I was like, okay, I didn't know we were shooting a video or taking pictures or what we were doing. And I got over to his house, and a buddy of mine owned a limo company, and he had called him, and he shows up, and I'm like, dude, what are you doing here? And he rolls up in a limo, and he was driving limos, and he had a limo service, and he shows up with a limo, and he picked up Buddy and I and everybody, and he took us to hang. We went to the Fair Park Music Hall, and to Prince's sound check, and we walked in, and the first person we met was Billy Sparks, who for people that don't know, the club owner in Purple Rain, who was his lifelong tour manager. And then Billy ran down a whole list of rules, and I'm like, what are we doing? And he's like, man, we're going to meet a friend of mine. And I, to be honest with you, I didn't even know he was playing in town until we like walked in the door, and I started seeing all the symbols, on the road cases. And I went, oh shit. I was like, whoa. And then Billy walks out and he gives us this whole list of rules. Like, man, he's like, if you're smoking cigarettes, don't, and I smoke, and he was like, don't smell like smoke around him. Don't smoke around him. Don't, even smell like smoke, a lot of different, there was this whole list of rules. And we walked in, and Takumi, my good bro, Takumi, who's a Japanese guitar tech who works with a lot of bands, and we're dear friends. We talk about it all the time. Walked in the door, and the first person I met after Billy was Takumi, and he's holding the Purple Rain Telecaster, and Takumi's standing right there, and he's like got the telly, and he's like, I walked in, and I was like, is that Prince's telly? And he was like, yeah, man, here. And like hung it on me. I was just like, what the fuck, and So we went backstage, and Maceo Parker was playing sax. You know, it's that whole Rainbow Children era with John Blackwell and Rhonda Smith on bass, and
Awesome band. Yeah.
you know, Nato on keyboard. You know, that whole band. And Candy Dolfer was playing sax, and Greg Boyer, and from P Funk. And so I go back and with Buddy, and Buddy just goes backstage, and he's Prince, Prince, and he's just screaming his name out. And then, you know, and he goes into Maceo Parker's green room and starts eating Maceo's catering, like unwraps it and just starts eating Maceo's food. And I'm like, oh my God, you're eating Maceo's catering. And Maceo comes in there and he's like, Buddy, what the hell are you doing in my food, man? You know, and I'm just like, oh my God, there's Maceo, you know. And so we're backstage, and then a door opens. I'm walking down the hallway, and a door opens beside me, and I went, oh shit, there's kids back here. And it was, and I go, oh shit, wait a minute. I go, there's Prince. I thought it was a little kid coming out of the door. There's this little guy, you know, and I was like, oh shit, there's kids back. And I was like, oh, whoa. And he just immediately was like, oh, hey, brother, what's up? And gave me a huge big ass hug and like held on to me and was like, buddy. And then went over to and had me, walked me over, and then we like doing this big group hug. And he's like, hey man, you guys want to go jam? And I was like, yeah. Like, sure. And we went up and jammed, and he played keyboard. He was playing keyboard, bass, and keys, and Buddy Miles was playing drums, and I'm playing the big cymbal plastic purple guitar. And Takumi's like, check this one out, you know, and he's handed me guitars, and wow. And we jammed for a long time, and Prince played keys and sang some shit. We played blues and all kinds of, he's like, man, and Buddy's like, Lance, play a blues, 2, 3, and Buddy's singing, you know, and then they're like trying to stop. And, you know, if you knew Buddy Miles, I mean, he could go on and on and on, and they were like trying to cut the sound check. They're like, Buddy, you know, and he just kept on going. And so we really, and then we had an after party jam after that at another club in Dallas after the show. So we jammed at Soundcheck for a long time. Prince played the show. Then we went to another club in Dallas. And yeah, and then we were friends from there on out, man. He had come to Dallas several times looking for me, and people gave me messages, and studio owners and production company people. And they were like, they would run into me and grab me and go, dude, Prince was in town. He was looking for you, man, you know, and it was really crazy. So a lot of deep admiration. We had some great hangs, and yeah, he was amazing. He was so supportive of me. And when those early records I did came out, you know, I sent him copies of them, and he wrote me notes back, and he gave me this beautiful golden eagle with diamonds in it, you know, that his jeweler had made. And you know, he was just such a great friend, man, such a great dude. I think the last time we hung out was probably 2011. You know, he came to Dallas, played a show, and you know, we hung out, and it was just like, you know, just making a good hang with a good friend. There was not all this mysterious mystique weirdness. It was just, he was just another bro, man. We just hung out and talked about, you know, all the music we loved, and what are you doing? What are you up to? What's going on? And jokes and laughing and fun and good times. And I mean, he literally, he held a conversation with me at one show. I'm standing up behind the PA column on the wings of the stage. He's out performing and dancing and doing all his shit. And we're talking about his guitar rig. And he's out like, and I'm going like, and he's explaining to me what all his pedals do. He's like coming out there going, and this one over here. And he's like, hold on 1 second. And he goes out there and does some more shit. And then goes back over there and goes, okay. And then this other one does this other thing. And this goes here. And the chorus pedal's there. And then the delay, 1 second. And then goes back out there again. And holds this entire conversation while he's explaining his guitar rig to me live. And I'm just sitting there going, I can't believe this is happening. Like, not missing a beat and doing all his shit and spinning and dancing and, you know, jumping and then coming back over there in the middle of and just keeping the conversation going. It was incredible. The greatest performer I've ever been on stage with, played with, been in the presence of.
Did you ever get to see him in person, play some guitar?
Oh yeah. Oh man, yeah. Yeah, we absolutely. Yeah, I mean that's we you know at that sound check, we pass guitar back and forth, and Takumi is always my defer, guy I go to, because I tell this story and they're like, yeah, right, whatever, man. And I just go, and I've had to like literally on Facebook just tag Takumi and go, Takumi, please come set this shit straight. Because these dudes ain't believing that this happened. And yeah, we had monumental hang, and it was epic. But yeah, I mean, he great knowledge of the blues and lead guitar. I mean, he was an incredible. I mean, just something that nobody ever talks about of what a brilliant, incredible guitar player Prince was. I mean, with all that rhythm shit we were talking about. I mean, and then that's what he loved about me, that I understood all that, and more so than the lead, again, more so than the lead playing, the chord voicings and where to place them and how to hold a pocket, and all that shit is what we talked about all the time.
Amazing. Wow.
So anyway, to get back to the original thing about the Ohio Players and all those bands, yeah, it was just further influence of him and being around those people and being around all those different artists of that caliber, and just understanding that Earth, Wind and Fire, Ohio Players, Parliament Funkadelic, and I went into again, then being around all of those guys, being good friends with Blackbird McKnight and Michael Hampton and all those guys, and really connecting with Blackbird, was really cool. And I knew Blackbird from playing with Miles. He was on I think the Flood record or one of those, because I was way into the Electric Mile shit, all the big, which was heavy hardcore funk music, and being influenced by that, and befriending all those guys, and discovering Eddie Hazel, and Eddie Hazel being such a huge influence on me, that's what really began to shape that sound. But even earlier than that was being a kid in New Orleans, and that's where my dad would take me down to Rock and Bowl when it was just a bowling alley. And it was like Art Neville and Half the Meters were playing, George Porter and those guys were playing there like every Wednesday night. And I'd go sit in with them. And I didn't even know who they were, And my dad was like, my dad's taking me to the bowling alley to play these old dudes again. It's like I'm up there sitting in with, half the Neville brothers, and they were, playing, that New Orleans funk, that whole other genre of funk music that, that I just naturally had grown up with. So it really began with the New Orleans stuff, and then, later on, like I said, playing in soul and R&B bands and playing with horn players and horn bands and other musicians in that world, they turned me on to that music. And then, meeting, a lot of my heroes, like we just talked about, like Prince, who further influenced that and turned me on to even more of that music. So, deeply embedded into that. And, and like I said, then, Eddie Hazel, another unsung hero, was always a huge, big hero of mine.
Did you ever meet him?
I never did. No, he passed away when I was in high school. So I didn't get to meet Eddie, but I heard a lot of stories through Buddy, Buddy Miles, really, they were really close, and they were actually planning on a Band of Gypsies thing with Eddie when he passed away. They were trying to get something happening there, and it never happened. So it was such a drag, because that was he was so great and so underrated, and people need to know more about Eddie Hazel.
There's much more to this great Truth and Rhythm interview. Just continue on to the next part of the episode. Also, be sure to subscribe to this channel. If you've already done so, please share it with friends. And become a member by joining Truth and Rhythm on Patreon, or consider donating at funkinstuff.net. Thank you very much.